Before we talk about Fallout New Vegas, I have a question. Have you ever been sexually attracted to a button? Or maybe you drank water from every toilet in the wasteland. Or have you ever forgotten your own brains somewhere?
Well, look who finally dragged themselves in out of the wasteland.
No? Then you've been playing the best 3D Fallout wrong, or perhaps hadn't played it at all. We're all addicted to something, and it's not even about biological needs. It's more about an addiction to, say, sweets. One simply cannot start his day without a cup of joe. The second eats cigarettes for breakfast. Smoking is cringe, by the way. The third is addicted to flavor enhancers and can't live without fast food. The fourth loves beer. Anyway, you get my meaning. But there's one thing we gamers all have in common. Almost everyone has been addicted to some game at some point. Obsessed with it. To the point when we could no longer concentrate on anything else, let alone playing other games. Day after day, for weeks on end, we could launch this one game only. Have you recognized yourself? Of course you have. I repent, I'm a sinner as well. But instead of dedicating this video to CSGO or Skyrim, although I've spent countless hours in these games as well, I decided to tell you about my experience with a game less popular in the framework of this topic, Fallout New Vegas. Unlike the old-timers of the series, my acquaintance with Fallout began with the fourth part. With previous games of the franchise, I had rather superficial relations. At first, I even confused the series with Flatout. May the fans of both franchises forgive me. Yes, I was young, silly, and inexperienced. But then came the thunderous release of the fourth Fallout. At first, since I didn't have a console nor a decent PC, I was forced to resort to watching the walkthrough on YouTube. Then, a year later, I finally managed to lay my naughty hands on the game itself. It was on PS4 Slim where I first tasted Fallout, or at least that's what I thought. Only years later had I realized what Fallout really was. In the meantime, I was running around Sanctuary, shooting ghouls, raiders, changing fusion cores in my power armor, building another settlement, and petting dog meat.
Hey boy, what are you doing out here all by yourself?
What else was there to do? My wife divorced me, my son is in an orphanage. Do whatever you feel like doing. I helped the Minutemen, the Brotherhood of Steel, even ran a couple of errands for the railroad, hooked up with the local waifu journalist Piper, and found the mysterious institute, where some Gramps says is my son. Oh, by the way, the video contains spoilers for the game that's 7 years old, so you've been warned. Though the main twist of the game has already been revealed. But better late than never. I had limited time to beat the game as I was visiting relatives. Therefore, side quests were often a luxury that I couldn't afford. Having beaten the main campaign for the Institute and having completed only a few side quests, I can recall only 2 memorable moments. An unexpected twist with the protagonist's son, and another unexpected twist with Paladin Daunt, who devoted his whole life to fighting synths and in the end turned out to be one of them.
Bruh.
Actually, even in a relatively short playthrough, the game manages to feed you quite a lot of content. Its quality, however, is a different matter. For example, I wasn't at all interested in garbage gathering and construction. For instance, endless settlement quests even became a meme.
Social service.
General?
Who's calling?
Preston Garvey, Commonwealth Minutemen.
But what was laughed at the most was the dialogue system. But I had nothing to compare it to, except for maybe Skyrim, which itself isn't exactly a masterpiece of script writing. So I didn't support the hate and was satisfied with the game overall. And even years later, I still have the desire to return to Fallout 4, with all the DLCs this time, to visit Nuka World.
Welcome to Nuka World, America's favorite vacation destination!
Far Harbor and other places. But I digress. So years have passed. And over these years, I filled the huge holes in my knowledge of the series. I learned that Fallout used to be not only isometric, but turn-based and role-playing. I thought Fallout 4 allowed for role-playing. Yet only when I saw what freedom of action and role-playing offers the original part did I realize how much the fourth Fallout has little to do with the concept of the original. But alas, because of the controls and turn-based system, I failed to develop a liking for the brainchild of the Black Isle Studios. But I still wanted to try out the true Fallout. You've probably already guessed what I'm getting at. Here the legendary New Vegas comes on stage, which I was able to acquire at a ridiculous price. New Vegas already had this aura of the so true 3D Fallout, because what Todd Howard and his friends did to the franchise in Part 3 upset all the fans, to say the least. The emphasis was shifted from role-playing to endless gunfights, and the shooting mechanics in Fallout 3 leave much to be desired. The game was panned for poor quality of most quests and empty locations. However, to be fair, I shall say that the game has both interesting quests and locations made with love for details. Bethesda actually made a decent Fallout, but then came the guys from Obsidian and made the best Fallout. By the time I launched New Vegas for the first time, the game had long since received its iconic status. Nevertheless, I had no high expectations. Actually, they were even rather low. After all, at that time, the only Fallout in my life was the fourth one. I decided to play the third part after New Vegas, which meant that I had awaited not only long outdated graphics, but also physics, which I would need to get used to. However, there were no problems. After a couple of hours, I stopped paying attention to low-res textures, the controls became intuitive, and shooting was causing much less pain in the ass. New Vegas showed me that Fallout is not primarily about shooting or, God forbid, melee combat. Above all else, Fallout is about interacting with the environment, with the characters, and learning more about them through dialogues. And oh boy, will you have to do a lot of talking and reading here. Which is a good thing, because some dialogues are truly masterfully written. We'll get back to them later. For now, my rookie courier encounters Easy Pete without the speech skill. I'm pretty sure that everyone who tried to convince Easy Pete to give you explosives in an early game without the explosive skill remembers that the old bastard just doesn't give a shit. Having realized that I won't be seeing any explosives, I had to look for alternative ways to solve the problem. And the problem was a bunch of powder gangsters that terrorized a small town. Naturally, Fallout wouldn't be Fallout if it didn't offer me a choice. To help the poor residents to defend their land, or to say screw it, join the gangsters and turn the town into a bloodbath. The remnants of conscience didn't allow me to harm the inhabitants of the city that saved my virtual ass, but the very thought of variability was very intriguing. But ahead of me was the main fork leading to 3 different ways of resolving the central conflict of the game. Who was to seize the Hoover Dam and the power over the entire strip? The NCR, the Legion, Mr. House? But then I met Yes Man and learned that I can actually screw everyone up and take the power over New Vegas myself. However, these were the concerns of the main quest, which the courier didn't care about just yet. My courier had just reached Novak, where a man named Boone was waiting for him, a grumpy sniper who surveils the city from a dinosaur statue. Boone isn't the friendliest of characters, but he doesn't have that many reasons to be friendly either. His wife was missing, disliked by almost everyone in town, so the sniper suspects every resident and asks the courier to find the culprit and bring him to the dinosaur statue. Here you enter the detective mode and start questioning every resident, attentively analyzing their words. The game doesn't limit you in any way and doesn't prohibit you to take another quest issued by a local elderly couple. In fact, this approach will only help to narrow the circle of suspects, even if just a bit. Do you know how I managed to find the culprit? I just sneaked into the hotel to steal as much shit as possible and found a safe that contained evidence. You could bring literally anyone to Boone, even someone who wasn't guilty. Just put a red beret on him as a marker and the guy would be shot. Long story short, the variability was growing with every quest and clearly wasn't planning on stopping. Yes, the game had lots of weapons, the ability to modify them, different kinds of armor, gunfights with explosions and gore. It was all great, don't get me wrong, but that wasn't what made the game appealing. It was the freedom of action, variability, insanely interesting characters and game situations, of which consisted most quests. Take the huge storyline about sentient ghouls based on the Rapcon test site, preparing to go to space. Throughout the questline, they'll ask the protagonist to clear the lower floors from super mutants, who worship a skull, which tells them to hunt down a huge batch of stealth boys. You can either just kill their ringleader or prove that there are no more stealth boys. And even the second option has its own consequences. In search of the stealth boys, you'll be sure to come across another ghoul, who'll ask you to find out what happened to his girlfriend who went missing in the cellars. Here we can either ignore the request and try to force our way through, sneak past, or find the girlfriend's corpse, and the ghoul will let us pass. Thus, we can reach the terminal, find out that there are no more stealth boys in stock, and the super mutants will depart peacefully, leaving room for the ghouls. Phew, and that was just one of the stages of a side quest. I think it gives you a pretty good idea about the level of elaborateness and variability of the game's quests. It reminds me of that meme from Pimp My Ride. You've added a couple more side quests into your side quests so that you could do side quests while you're doing a side quest. The juiciest part was that the game's story actually reacted to the player's actions. For example, somewhere near the middle of the campaign, you had to help an organization who called themselves Boomers. I understood where the name came from when I approached their airfield base. I've never been blown so many times in any game ever. I had to run at random, like I was on a minefield. In the end, I managed to complete a couple of quests for them. During one of them, I managed to retrieve a bomber from the bottom of the ocean, which I had then forgotten about, and hadn't remembered until a couple dozen hours later, during the final battle of the dam, when the plane flew gracefully over the heads of the legionaries, showering them with a hail of bombs. And as you have already probably guessed, the game had completely consumed me by that point. The contact with real life was lost for weeks. There was just nothing more exciting in the world than Fallout New Vegas. What friends, what girls. I'd love to find out how to buy a GRA large caliber sniper rifle for cheaper and where to get Ranger combat armor, preferably for free. I would wake up thinking, man, I can't wait to play Fallout, and go to bed studying the game's lore. New Vegas offered an endless stream of fascinating content. It was easily found, and at times you could even generate it yourself, what gave you a steady supply of endorphins. It seemed like the game had surprises around every corner. While exploring another location, I stumbled upon a challenge, at the end of which I was given a talking stealth armor that increased the sneak skill.
Bob, I can see you. For God's sake, you're three-dimensional.
If you buy lots of stim packs, the armor can become OP, as its AI will automatically heal the player when needed. But this would require not dozens but hundreds of stim packs. I'm not used to be wasteful with medicine, so I didn't use stealth armor that often. Besides, her protection stats are pretty average. However, it could warn you about the presence of enemies nearby and even joke at times.
Nobody ever notices me, but they notice the Pip-Boy light.
The game fascinated me with the quantity and quality of its content. It stole all of my free time, and with each day it was stealing more and more of my busy time as well. I would come to the office and find myself unable to concentrate, because in my mind I was still roaming the wasteland of Mojave. I remember how me and my colleague, who'd also spent quite some time playing Fallout, could talk about the game for hours on end instead of working. I would constantly be browsing the fandom pages, reading about the backstories of the characters I found particularly interesting, like Joshua Graham or Lanius. And as soon as I got home, I would immediately start my computer and immerse myself in the wondrous world of post-apocalypse. And it went on, day after day, night after night. There was plenty of content. It never seemed to end. Sometimes it seemed that there was so much of it that it was just scattered everywhere on the floor, and at the same time I felt like it was skillfully hidden in plain sight. I mean, I could walk up to a random couple chilling at the train station and accidentally start a chain of quests that led me to a casino hotel where the kitchen was run by a cannibal. I think everyone who has ever played New Vegas will agree that Beyond the Beef is one of the most exciting and replayable quests in the whole game. Even if it didn't have a lot of action. Everything was built on research, stealth, and dialogues. Speaking of dialogues, the game has shitloads of them. I had to spend literal evenings reading walls of texts, not because the game forced me to, but because this revealed lots of ways to complete a quest in some other way than to go straight ahead and annihilate everyone. After all, it's much more interesting to outwit, outplay, and destroy the enemy, rather than to just shoot him, especially when dozens of gold bars are at stake. Yes, we are talking about Father Elijah, whom many players would lock in Sierra Madre's vault after having stolen all the gold. When I found out about this option to complete the final quest of Dead Money, I think I spent the whole night just with this quest. I distinctly remember how I spent 2 hours desperately trying to sneak past with all the ingots using the stealth boy. Of course, they caused an overload and the courier was walking slower than a snail. I tried to sneak and use timings so that Elijah wouldn't notice me, but he seemingly had eyes on his back. After dozens of unsuccessful attempts, I managed to trap the old bugger and came out of the damn place rich. Then I turned the computer off and saw that it was already 7 AM, and that I had missed an event at my work because of Fallout. And what kind of event can there be when New Vegas has such amazing DLCs? Each of them added something new that diluted the gameplay, even if just a bit. The changes felt most strongly in Dead Money we've just mentioned. You were literally thrown into a toxic, unfriendly, dangerous and unknown place with a collar around your neck. You had to listen to the signals it emitted, because if the beeping accelerated to a certain point, the collar would explode along with the protagonist's head. And when local indigenes are chasing you throwing spears, while poisonous smoke clouds your sight, running the wrong directions and having your brains blown out was a piece of cake. Another major DLC called Old World Blues added even more awesome content to Fallout. How many games do you know where the protagonist has to find missing modules for his smart house, which have their own consciousness and even characters on a software level? Shit, when I started feeling attracted to a button and flirting with her, I realized it was time to finally find a girlfriend. There's also a manic toaster that devours other toasters, thus recycling materials for you. A small Securitron obsessed with washing dishes who constantly demands new mugs to wash. A biological cloning station asking you to donate your seed. In what game do you get to talk to your own brain? It's mind-boggling. The smile just never left my face while I was playing the game. And if by any chance you think that these characters don't mean anything, and that they are just funny little trinkets meant to dilute the main story, you're wrong. As I've already said, each element of the smart house is endowed with personal characteristics and its own problems, and you will be the one to solve them by performing various tasks. And at the end of the DLC, the voiceover will, as always, tell you about the future fate of all the characters. About the button, about the psychotic dishwasher, and even about your own brain, if you somehow forget to implant it back. New Vegas plays masterfully with your mood, so if one quest gave some laughs, in the next one the narrative tone will be much darker and more dramatic. The Honest Hearts DLC offers the player a dilemma: to risk his own safety but try resolving the conflict peacefully, or to secure himself while staining the hands of innocent souls with blood and showing them the way of violence. In the last DLC called Lonesome Road, the protagonist is accompanied by a robot called Edie, whose sad story is revealed through audio snippets of its memories. While playing the DLC, you become so attached to the squeaky baby that at the end of the DLC rescuing him is out of question. You just go and save him. Only after finishing the final chapter of the courier's story did my fervor wear down a bit. Dozens of hours of intense gameplay were behind me. For weeks I had been savoring Fallout, opening new locations, leveling up my character, shooting legionaries' limbs off, picking locks, smacking enemies flee with nothing but speech. It was simply impossible to stop playing. The game was extremely addictive. I wanted to get back into it again and again. New Vegas was a drug that I got off in order to function properly and not lose my job. After all, as soon as there's less to do, the Mojave Wasteland will be waiting for me. Who knows how many more quests and ways to complete them did I miss? If you too have a game that got you addicted, please do share with us in the comment section. And that's about it. Thank you so much for watching. Smash that like button if in the end you chose an independent New Vegas. And remember to tune in next time.